Sorry, but even for one day it was difficult to bring all great women on board. And I will come back to my introductory words because preparing this event was a quite challenging one task. And somehow I hid the hype of gender equality because it's the question and representation of women, underrepresentation of women, the theme going on around the world. And it somehow came at the right moment even for Croatia. So I did have some nasty comments, and so I will be very open. So luckily they're minorities still, and we will neglect them, but I would refer to them, and I told some of you that I will say it. It seems like even they will have a complaint even if the penguins from the film industry would gather, they will not be happy, you know? All those little penguins in documentaries and great films about penguins, if they gather, those people will still be not happy. But I'm pleased that there are a majority of us underlining the importance of speaking the gender equality. It's not the gender balance, it's the gender equality, even though I did have also comment from Brussels that I need to focus more on gender balance. But I said, sorry, it's the last minute. It's my concept, and the intention, not goal, nor the intention of this event is gender balance, but gender equality.
Can I say something, Martina, about this?
Before introducing you? Or shall I
I can't help myself. It's very interesting that when we have panels, frequently we have panels which are men, all the time. Happens all the time to women in the industry. And for once we have panels made up of women, and it's a problem.
Yeah.
Really?
No. So this was Francine. So we will start with Francine. Francine was the founder of European, actually it was your idea, about the European Women Association, and just remind me, it was 2000
So in 2013 I founded the European Women's Audiovisual Network.
Audiovisual Network, yes. And now you are still attached to the network as a PR. Yeah. But your other focus is within the Eurimages, working strongly on the recommendation on the gender equality in the European audiovisual sector. Yeah. If I may just add, one chair is missing, Alessia Sonaglioni, who is at the moment director of Aviva. She unfortunately missed today because of her health, due to her health issues. But I'm sure that Francine will back her up. The rumor has it. Yes, so after Francine, I would like to continue with Tamara. Tamara, let's say, is a young female producer, and she just recently established her own company with 2 women. That's important to underline. And when it comes to media, this is the lady who managed to get the only creation training within EAVE, Midpoint, Cartoon, and etc. But this is the lady who managed to really work with me hard to get the first creation training, Zagreb Docs Pro, to be supported by media. So give her applause. Yeah, we need to remember the first stories. So, and at the same time, Tamara is also appointed on behalf of the Croatian Producers Association within the working group on gender equality or at the Council of Europe, right?
Yeah, hello everyone. I was there just for one time, to be fair, when the ad hoc working group was there, and I was taking the place of Mrs. Sanja Ravlić, who is, I think, here today, who also deserves much huger applause than I do. So it was a great experience, and I can once again thank Francine and all of the colleagues there for all the work we did together, and they really are a supportive group of women, and there were a few men there as well. And I would just like to add, Francine, maybe, you know, all the gender balance issue comes up because women are actually a majority by 1%, for instance, in Croatia. So this is actually the majority oppressing the minority, I think, today.
What do you think, Aviva? I need to also highlight Aviva's role. She, as I said at the beginning, supported me on a personal and at this Brussels bureaucratic level, because she was the one to pick up the phone during the Christmas time, and she has been supporting me and the media as such ever since. You've been for almost 25 years in the film industry, mostly related to media program and Media Mundus. Now you have your own company. It's more focused on production and consulting, but I definitely think you have a say on gender equality.
Is this working? Yes. Well, I was thinking about it as I was sitting here and thinking that I ended up as a lawyer because my father didn't want me to be a doctor because he thought it was a bad career for a woman. I'm not sure that being a lawyer was any better, but I was struck listening to the commissioner talking about the media program and thinking about the discussions we had in the past about gender equality and making the program more friendly towards women, and looking at the statistics at the Aviva event in Berlin and how the gender of the scriptwriter is going to affect in an incredibly fundamental manner how a woman's role will result in the film. And that really shocked me, to know that a woman's scriptwriter is going to have such an impact on a film. It was a big surprise. So, and then I went back to the evaluations of media and saw the impact we had with the training program, and it's important to see that there are good training programs coming out of Croatia. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to Martina for inviting me and to underline what amazing work she's been doing here in Croatia for the last 10 years. So well done to Martina, well done for the conference, but most of all, well done for all the work that you've done here for the last 10 years. I think as a woman in the industry, it's always difficult to be a woman in any industry because you have to achieve so much more to get anywhere. And I think that's the same in audiovisual, the same as it is in any industry. And I think maybe what's different in audiovisual is that people are more supportive of each other. That's what I've seen, compared to being a lawyer, compared to being in many other industries. There's a lot more support, a lot more friendliness, and perhaps more competitiveness in certain sectors as well of the industry. There are a lot more egos. Perhaps that goes with creativity. And having moved into the private sector, one of the things I found more difficult is that you come up with ideas, and one of our projects, we had some difficulties with it, and we approached another company, and one of the men involved said to us, well, you've been doing it all wrong. And the suggestion was that he could do it much better than we could. And it was clearly, his approach was, well, you're women and you don't know how to do it. And I was really quite surprised by that. But in the end, he didn't manage to do it either, so I guess it wasn't us, it was simply that the project was no good. So that made me feel a bit better.
Yeah. Maybe for better understanding of our panel, maybe Francine, we start with your presentation, so that we let people know. I'm sorry?
Is there a beeper?
So you can give us some highlights about the recommendation and adopted by the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe last September in 2017. Maybe you can also stand up if you feel more comfortable. Or
Yeah, I might stand over there actually to be able to see it at the same time, because otherwise, hold on. Oops. Yeah, that's kind of better. Well, to start with, this image represents the Eurimages strategy aiming for 50-50 by 2020. So I hope you'll see this image on many occasions now going forwards. Eurimages itself has been working in the field of gender equality now since 2013. And a Eurimages Gender Equality Working Group was set up. And the first thing that this working group does is to organise outreach meetings. So the first stage was just awareness raising within the industry. And the great thing about Eurimages is we have our board of management meetings 4 times a year in different countries. So these are a great opportunity to raise awareness, just to start the ball rolling. And then we also started in 2013 with monitoring tools. So these monitoring tools meant that every time a producer applied for funding, they had to indicate the gender of all members of cast and crew, so that we had some statistics for down the line. And then we had the Bechdel test for script readers. Does everyone know the Bechdel test, I guess? Yeah. Okay, so the Bechdel test is a very straightforward test. Does a film have 2 female characters with names who speak to each other about something other than a man? And you'd be surprised by how many films fail the Bechdel test. So they were the starter for Eurimages, looking into the situation. But then we took it one step further, because we wanted to make sure that there was some kind of legislation in place to really make a difference. So in Sarajevo Film Festival in 2015, there was a conference declaration adopted, and that gave us the momentum to prepare a pan-European recommendation on gender equality in the audiovisual sector. So the Council of Europe is quite a bureaucratic organisation, and it took about just over 2 years in total to have the recommendation adopted. And we were glad to have representatives like Tamara on the panel, on the working group. And what was really important in this recommendation was not to have a short Council of Europe recommendation which just says we recommend in the future we think about gender equality, but really to give practical ideas about how to improve the situation, starting with acknowledging the problems inherent in the industry. So not saying that the industry is fine or it's a level playing field, but setting out what's wrong in the industry. And then promoting a variety of solutions to address these issues, and then especially addressing this issue of fragmentation of data monitoring, which is really still a problem. Now, the Slovenian Film Centre did a really great event earlier this week. I don't know if any of you saw it on social media, when Hannah Slack, who's working in Slovenia, stood on stage, and she had data. And she had in her right hand a list of all the female directors who'd received support, and it was this short. And in her left hand, all the male directors who'd received support, and it was that long. So she stood on a table to illustrate it. And that's just to reinforce the idea that having data, and if possible throughout the whole of Europe, makes a really big difference to the situation, because without data, you can't prove that there's inequality in the industry. So this recommendation, as I mentioned, talks about a lack of awareness of the prevalence of inequality, the conscious and unconscious gender bias at all levels in the industry, and the unequal distribution of funding for audiovisual content. And then it goes beyond that, because we wanted to come up with solutions. So we set out what's wrong, and then we provided solutions. And in the preamble to the recommendation, and in Appendix 1 to the recommendation, we propose for member states of the Council of Europe, so that's 47 countries, who've all adopted the recommendation, that they review the legislation and policies, that they start to collect, monitor and publish data, that they support research, that they encourage the development of media literacy, and very important with the Me Too situation, they have enhanced accountability. So that's Appendix 1 of the recommendation. And then, to be even more practical, we have an Appendix 2. And in the Appendix 2, we provided really detailed monitoring methodology and performance indicators, which can be used for both the video games industry, TV, and the film industry. And it was offering guidelines. So, for example, I did a presentation to the FADs during the Berlin Film Festival, the Gender Equality Working Group of the FADs, to encourage them to start to try and do the collection of data. And at the end of the recommendation, we have a section of reference tools. And then a recommendation at the Council of Europe, sometimes they're all well and good, but what happens with them? You know, they exist, but they're only a recommendation. So we've got kind of an active, follow-on. You can see here some of the events where we're talking, and it will keep on growing. And then on top of that, what's kind of exciting is to see already that some national level bodies have already used the recommendation to change policy. So in Germany, the several film schools are drawing on the recommendation. So for example, as was mentioned at the start, we, instead of speaking only about male directors in the canon of history of directors, we also speak about female directors. And the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland has also adopted aspects of the recommendation in their gender equality policy. So that's the Council of Europe recommendation. And just to be brief, we also have the strategy for Eurimages, which is aiming for 50-50 by 2020. And essentially, this is a means of encouraging the fund to strive for equal distribution of public funding. And this is something which, when we met Jane Campion back in 2013, she said, you'll never change the industry unless public money is distributed equally. And so that's really the goal of Eurimages at the moment. So on the front page of the Eurimages Gender Equality website, you can see the status, the percentage we're at. So our aim is that by June 2020, in a conference in Sweden, we managed to try at least to aim for the 50-50. So it's an ongoing goal, ongoing work via awareness raising, visibility initiatives, data monitoring, research, advocacy and strategies. And we have 2 little brochures online. At the moment, they have the same cover look. I'll just show you quickly. But they're kind of helpful, simplified guidelines. One is on the recommendation, and the other is on the strategy, and I have a few copies as well. And now we go back to the panel.
Yeah, so it's the stage part, so let's go back. Sorry. Definitely, there are also good examples when it comes paying attention to the awareness and participation of women in the European audiovisual industry, like Sweden. Iceland also introduced and is working on some gender incentives. You will back me up. Finland, Sweden, Italy as well.
Austria,
yes.
Now France has done an amazing roadmap for change, which is really exciting because that's a massive change in France. And they've got a strategy which is very similar to ours, which is Objectif 50-50 en 2020, with action guidelines. So we're terribly happy because it's so in line with our own strategy. It's just wonderful. So many countries are really adopting strategies now.
Just to come back with Croatia, I took out the information from the site. So, Tamara, are you ready? From 2008 to 2016, so 78 feature films were produced. Out of them, 14 female directors were involved and 65 male directors, or in percentage, 19% of female directors and 81 were male. I'm not sure if you're aware of all those good examples, but when it comes to Austria, and I was also at the same, I was also at the panel organized by Eurimages, but also at a different introduction of a special workshop based on the women producers, and they announced their gender incentive scheme. I'm coming back to. Okay. Yeah. What do you think? You can choose the hat, personal or on behalf of the Croatian Producers Association. Would you go with some recommendation towards the Croatian Audiovisual Center or the Ministry of Culture, or did you have actually time to reflect on this with all those things going on at the moment?
I will go on the personal level, and yes, I have had time to reflect on it because it is my daily life, because I am a woman in the audiovisual sector. I must just say that this data, although it shows that a lot more male directors get the public funding at the moment, I have to say that with your work and the work of Croatian Audiovisual Center, this is actually quite an improvement from 2004 when I enrolled into the academy. I think there was only one woman director from Croatia at that time that had a feature-length film completed, I think. I'm right, Ankica, thank you. And since then, a lot more female directors got that big money, because you always had a lot of women in directing or in short film or in experimental. And that is something that I noticed in Croatia and also in Europe as a whole, and I think it's even a bigger topic in the United States because I think their pay gap is bigger than ours. And that is that women usually get opportunities first in those places where there is little money and a lot of hard work is needed, and a lot of education and a lot of personal investment. And so I think this is one of the things I would like us to think about. And I see here in the audience some of my former professors and people who work at the Academy of Dramatic Arts, and also people who I think work in the Croatian Audiovisual Center still. And I think they should all consider reading this recommendation and seeing together with all of us who make films how we can implement more of this into our daily life and into our daily work. So this is basically how we look at it every day, because every day I think it's a topic for all of us. And I would just like to add one thing that I especially liked when we were working together in Strasbourg on the recommendation. At a certain moment we were speaking about work and life balance, which I think is a big topic that we don't tackle, and it's a big topic from both sides, from male and female. Because I know a lot of women who wonder, oh, I should have kids, but I'm not sure if I really want to, or I'm at a point in my career where I don't know if I can afford to have kids. And I know a lot of men who get a baby and say, oh my God, I now have to go back to work, and I would actually really like to stay at home for 3 or 6 months or a year and spend time with my family. And I remember at the academy, one of my male friends, who is a feminist and very liberal, and he said, you know, for you girls, I think you should have babies either right now while you're studying, or much, much later when you already established a very strong name. Otherwise, you will not be able to come back to work because you will disappear. And then I liked, and I will finish with this, and our colleague from Denmark said, in Denmark, we no longer call it work and life balance, we call it work and life compromise. I think if we all consider this much gentler side of equality and balance in our lives, we will enable ourselves to make a society and a community in which we are much more content individuals. And I think then we will also make even better films. So I think we should think about that.
Thank you. Yeah. Aviva, can we just go quickly to you and your experience in Brussels, for example, to tackle the participation of women and men at different, not only DGs, but is there attention paid to balance both?
In the European Commission, it's very difficult. There's a big discrimination between men and women in the European Commission itself, in terms of management, it's much more difficult to progress as a woman in management, I found. I mean, I've left the European Commission now, and I think it's changed over the last years. There's been much more attention given to this issue, and I think that's a very good thing. But when I became a manager in the Commission, it was decided mainly by men, and women with children were considered to be much less desirable as managers. And I think that attitude has changed in the Commission, though not completely. And it's an attitude that hangs on in lots of places. And this idea of waiting to establish yourself to have children, I think it remains and creates a lot of problem for people. And people in my team, women said to me, I don't think I want to become a head of unit if I have to work the way you work. And it means being seen to be in the office at certain times of day, to not be out of the office. And I think that there are lots of things about working practices that need to change so that the new technologies that the Commissioner was talking about can actually make working lives better. You know, if it means that you need to be in the office and be seen to be working, I don't think that they're really being used to help us be more productive or to make things better for anyone. But these are the things about transitional periods that make it harder anyway. So I think things are changing, things will change, but Brussels in itself is quite a strange place to work. There are so many different nationalities, and I think that's part of the attraction of working for the European Commission, that you get to work with people from so many different countries and you see so many different ways of working. And the way in which it's set up, of course, has changed over time. Having worked on the media program and got to work with all these media desks and local offices and worked in all these different countries and seen all these different things, and having set up all these new programs and evaluated them, then you get to see how the industry works in all these different countries, and that the way in which the audiovisual sector works and the way in which it's supported in different countries is also quite different. So the way in which the Germans support the individual countries, the individual programs, is quite different from the way in which the UK does, or the French do, or the Croatians do. And that also affects the way in which women get to work or don't get to work in the industry. So, for example, in the UK, it may be easier to work in television than in film, because it was easier to work for the BBC, because they had big training programs, and then you could be a producer on a regular job, rather than, as Kostas used to say to me, production's a job for women. The working hours are terrible, the pay's terrible. Clearly it's a job for a woman.
Dear Kostas.
Well, you know.
Yeah.
So then you see, whereas in France there was a lot of public money always put into, particularly into cinema. So
we are all different, yeah.
yeah.
Just you reminded me that we are very proud that the Croatian representative of the European Parliament, Ms. Borzan, just received the award for fighting and defending women's rights. So she was among the 3 chosen, and she received the award. So we are on that way, on the track. So even Croatian. Let me go back to the history, since Alessia is not with us. So maybe, Francine, you can cover how European Women Association was established. What does it offer? And do you have any plans and for the future? Because it seems with the new EU commissioner, Eva was taken seriously, because this was the first time during Berlinale that Alessia was invited for a meeting, bilateral meeting. So it's a very big plus. So maybe you can reflect on that, not only on this one, but on Eva, because maybe not many people in the audience are aware of existing Eva.
So the reason why it's a totally different CAP, no longer Eurimages, but Eva Network. In 2012, in Cannes Film Festival, I found the atmosphere particularly, it was particularly clear to me that the industry wasn't a level playing field, and that for all we spoke about liberal art house movies, at the end of the day, the industry was very happy to have a lot of male directors, and women were kind of decorative. And the French, it's called Les Barbes, wrote a letter to Le Monde, which was published, confirming this. And I had an incident when I was walking to an event, a Zentropa party, where 3 men in the street followed me, tried to attack me. And the same night, someone else tried to attack me. And I thought to myself, my God, this industry, and it was because the taxis are on strike. This is Cannes. But this industry does nothing for women. You know, where's the protection? So I thought we need to do something to help women in the industry, not just to be decorative, but to actually have a creative voice and to be taken just as seriously as men. And I attended a Women in Film and TV UK reception, and it was there that I thought to myself, what we need is a pan-European association promoting gender equality in the audiovisual sector. And that's when I decided to set up the European Women's Audiovisual Network in its current incarnation. And I took a 2-year sabbatical from my job to do that. And in the steps of that work, something important to mention would be that from the outset for me, data was essential, because people would say to me, there's not really a problem of inequality, Francine, things are getting better. I thought, well, no, they're not. Things aren't getting better. But we can't prove that until we have data. So right from the outset, I had this idea of doing a study, a 7-country study.
Croatia was one of them, right? Yeah.
Which Eva published then in 2016. It was a big labour of love. It was a lot of work. It involved 4 universities, 6 National Film Fund research centres, including, we had Sanja Ravlic, wherever she is, here, wave up for Croatia, with all the data. It was a huge amount of work. I mean, it was a little bit too ambitious. But anyway, we prepared this 400-page report, which you can find on the Eva website, so that's ewawomen.com. And what it did was it provided credibility for the network, because then we had data, we had information, we had a very serious research report to share. And from that then, if you like, we were taken more seriously. And what was very pleasurable was frequently people would then quote this research report, never having met me or never knowing anything about it. I think it was a French Minister of Culture who quoted it at a panel. I thought, fabulous. And people on TV. So it really had an impact. But the other thing about the network, which is important now, the focus that Alessia is bringing to it, she's been director now for almost 2 years, is that she really wants to reach out for the grassroots level, for the mentoring schemes, for really encouraging. So we already had a network from the outset, but she's really focusing now on having the networking and bringing women together in the industry. And in terms of the meeting as well with the commissioner, this is huge progress. I remember going to meet, at the time it was Xavier Troussard, and I asked him, can we please have data, please, from the EU? And he said, I'll do my best. But then, unfortunately, he left. So I'm really glad to hear that now we're going to get the data. So this is huge progress. And I think that over time, I think people don't realise that EVA is really funded by just a few national film funds. We have a lot of people working for free. But the work that we do is very important. And so I'm now more in the sidelines, But what I did was I used the EVA report as a basis, in a way, for that Council of Europe recommendation. So when I went back to the Council of Europe, we were able to transpose and reference EVA within that. And I think EVA is important because, especially in the UK, we're very good at having these boys' clubs, these boys' networks, where men will all go to a club together and join up together and help each other. And women haven't traditionally done this in the same way. And I think it's important that people who believe in gender equality come together, and that includes men. But it's just to redress this imbalance, because at the end of the day, we're missing out on the diversity of content, and that needs to change. And in terms of EVA's future work, I know we have a collaboration with ERV that started in March, and this was focusing on female stories with female leads, essentially. So encouraging stories that have a more female-driven characters, so that precisely that Bechdel test drama can be countered.
And you also offer a special training for women directors as well, right?
There will be one for directors coming up. At the moment, it's a mentoring scheme for producers, which was launched in Trieste. Mm-hmm. And that's really, again, about being smart in that a young producer will need to have someone more experienced in the industry to really help them move forwards with their career. So that's a really important initiative as well. Alessia's background was, apart from being a lawyer and also working like me part-time in Eurimages, she's also a coach. Mm-hmm. So for her, it was very important to bring that coaching element back into EVA Network, and I think it's working really well. She's doing a great job, so yeah. I'm happy.
Let me see how the time is. Can you maybe, Tamara, share with us how do you choose your projects? And would you like to share at the moment which ones are you working on?
I will not go into detail of the projects, but
the basis.
Now that I have my own company, I guess I choose them mostly through intuition. Of what combination of topic, author, and way of looking at it will move me forward to do my producer's job the best way that I can. Where I think that an issue is important, that is close to my heart, and it will reach and it will have an impact on the audience. So it's mostly very intuitive.
It doesn't matter if it's a female or male-driven. It just needs to be
good... No, I did start the company with two other ladies. We're a classic, what we call at the Academy, triangle of director, scriptwriter, and producer. And we knew each other from university and went on to build careers in very different directions. And then accidentally or by faith or whatever you believe in, met at the time when we were all three ready to make something of our own. So that is how we came together. And maybe it might have been another boy among us, but now it's three ladies, and we have what we call a house cinematographer who is a guy, so it's not always just women.
Yeah, I mean, I used to have an assistant, and he was really great. I miss him a lot, but we will see who will apply at the post finally announced. So yeah, it's open to men and women, of course. And what about you, Aviva? Any projects that you would want? Yeah, I'm alone in the office, you know. Yeah, I can do it.
Well, I set up the company with, well, you know her very well, Nathalie Chanel, who was the head of the media desk in Paris. So another woman, also from the media program. And again, the projects find their way to us. It's been a choice of projects, again, on an intuitive basis, projects that we think we can help. Also, projects where we have something to add to them. On a separate basis, I'm writing a children's book, which is something I've been working on for a long time. Stories I used to tell to my niece that she asked me to write down, and I met an artist who said he would illustrate them for me, so a man who's going to draw me pictures. So a variety of different projects, of which one fell by the wayside and a new one came along. Some with Spain, some with Germany, some with the UK. It's been a very interesting time since I left the European Commission. In some ways easier and in some ways harder than I thought it would be to be in the private sector, but much nicer to be in a very small organization than in a very big organization, and to decide for myself what I'm going to do. Though I miss the contact with a lot of different countries on a very regular basis, it's nice to be autonomous. I think that's to have your own company and not to be answerable only to yourself.
Yeah, 50%.
I second that.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah. Dear audience, do you have any questions for our wonderful ladies? Or you are still speechless? Okay. Yes.
I think
there's a... Just wait for the mic.
I mean, we are trying, as probably most places. We have, as a very small community and with limited infrastructures, we don't have, for example, higher level formal education where you can actually maybe control. So it's very much buddy based, the industry so far. So I think, with I think it's great what you're doing at the Eurimages, but that's like at the end, at the top of the chain. I mean, so much has happened before, and I think we should really try and make more programs, temporarily programs for women within the European umbrella, especially the networking. I think it's an essential. Simple travel grants. It does not have to be that expensive in the big context, and somehow prioritize their presence in various festivals, markets, because it has so much to do with the buddy world, and if we can have more women buddy, it's really an important thing. We have also been formulating in Iceland a method to give women consequently higher grants, like 20%. If because there's so much, we know it's not only a myth, but it is more difficult for women to finance their projects, and they tend to get less money. I mean, that's, I think, a global, and it's not only in the film sector. So we're trying to kind of give them that kind of a push. But then, of course, when you get more players, more women, active women, Earth trembles while we're going through the phase of change, because the money is more or less the same. So now we have more. So obviously there is, it's worrying some men. They don't say it out loudly, but we can sense it. And that's also a bit of a challenge for us, I think, on the funding side. So any tools are really so good for us, So I think that's also quite important to have that kind of course it depends on territory, but if we don't have a certain tool to point at, to be able to keep like a slot for women and so on, it's really hard for us to.
I would definitely say that within the recommendation itself, the appendices, there are specific proposals. We went into a lot of we had huge discussions. We wanted to make it really extensive. And I think there will be some parts of the recommendation, especially Appendix 1, which you'll find really interesting, because they're actually proposing tools to improve the situation. And something which I didn't go into detail because there is so much to talk about, but something we're working very hard on now is improving the visibility of the directors as well. So we're going to have interviews with female directors who receive support and put those on social media, support things like Fade to Her magazine to get the information out there. And then the final thing that we do within Eurimages at the moment, because we are a top financier, we come at the end. But what we've realised is that women's projects which have a female director attached tend to be more modest in the amount of application they apply for, the funding they apply for. And so we have what is called a fourchette. And a fourchette is the margin by which we reduce a project support. And we've decided now that from now on, all projects which have a female director attached, the fourchette is not reduced. We don't reduce the amount that they apply for, just to try and redress that imbalance of being too modest in applying for the funding, etc. So we do have different ways of addressing that, but the recommendation, I think, could be useful as well. So, yeah.
Elena?
Yes, hi, my name is Lena Pasanen. I'm the festival director of Doc Leipzig. And I've been under a lot of criticism lately because last year I introduced a female quota for our competitions. Yeah. We have a really big problem when it comes to feature-length films in our German competition. It seems to be easier in the international competition, but especially somehow in Germany at film school 50-50, men and women. When it comes to short films, mid-length films, 50-50, and then they disappear when it comes to feature-length films. And we are really trying to sort of understand where do they go. I think that data in this sense is really important, and I'm a big fan of Eva as well. It's been really great working with them. There are people saying that, you know, festivals, you are the receiving end, why do you care? That the decisions are done somewhere else, and now some poor Oscar-winning guy will lose his chance because you have to take a woman because of this quota, and all this kind of bullshit. So we really need a lot of these good examples, how really to force the change. And it is a question of forcing. We can't just hope for the best, but we have to take these actions. And it also comes to selection committees. It comes to having the first round, for example, anonymously, so that you don't know whether it's a female or male. And all these tools we are using now. And it's really interesting to see how it will go. Coming back to data, I really hope that there would be some public funding also to do these researches. What happens to these ladies when they are aiming at the big league with the bigger budget? Because for us, we can't use the money for that it's not according to the mandate that we've gotten the money, or it's otherwise difficult to get. And also the separation between fiction or feature films and documentaries. I know that in many cases documentary filmmaking scene is a little bit better than fiction when it comes to gender equality, but still we need even more specified data.
So I have some good news.
Good.
Yes, I have some good news. So when we were doing the EVA research, we had key researchers in all of the different countries, and we hoped to work with the FFR. Originally, they agreed that the National Film Fund would actually be our partner, and then they changed their minds. But fortunately, Skadi Loist and Dr. Elisabeth Kommer stepped in and did the research for us in Germany anyway. And Skadi Loist has been given a new post as visiting professor at Babelsberg University, where she's going to be specifically doing research into this area. So I would suggest that if there are specific themes that you want her to look into, she has the budget now to do that work. She has a mandate. So she's the best contact for that. And she's also linked into an international research network with Australia, around the world, to try and get the data out there. So she, I think, would be a great person, if you don't know her already, to connect with. Good news.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay, I don't even see. We are just really on. You want to add something?
Yeah,
sorry.
I just wanted to say, I don't know if anyone follows him, but his name is Stephen Follows. It's not directly relevant, but he's a great statistician. He's super to follow. He does a weekly email. He's also on LinkedIn. And he's done some really interesting research on female directors, mainly in Hollywood, showing how they're just not trusted. that, for example, it's changing very slightly now, which I think is partly because of this Me Too, Time's Up, etc. But looking at the budgets women have been given in the last years, looking at the types of film they've been given to direct in Hollywood, it's not really surprising with what we see from the Bechdel test, etc. But also because I've got a very important interest in the projects we deal with media literacy and other things. If you look at the studies that have been run in terms of sexuality, in terms of the number of women you see naked in films in the States, how likely are you to be seen naked if you are between 18 and 25 in a film? Well, it's over, I think, 70% if you're a woman and under 15% if you're a man. I mean, that's American statistics. I mean, and the same with what are the standards in terms of swearing or nudity, etc. But the point is, if you look at, or you'll find him easily enough, Stephen Follows. There's a lot of very interesting information, not just on gender equality, but also wonderful stuff on film budgets, horror, all sorts of great things. I mean, I'm much too scared to watch horror films, but I love reading about them because I think it's a great way to get young people back into cinema again. Anyway, for what it's worth.
I think there are great suggestions. We also need to kind of remember where we are coming from. I come from Finland. Women got the right to vote 1906. I live now in Germany, where until 1977, a Hausfrau had to ask a permission from her husband whether they could go and work outside of the family. This was on West German side. So of course, you know, we also have to be very clear on what is still the kind of general atmosphere and this kind of old patterns that it's really difficult to even notice if this is has been your reality for most of the time. I remember visiting Austria and wondering why in the car park it says for women with children. And I was kind of asking whether a man with his kids would be allowed to park there. And this was still a couple of years ago. So this is where we are, and we also have to kind of help those countries where there's still even more work with really good statistics and examples of success stories, like this quota thing. We have a lot of good examples in the Nordic countries about it, or in Northern America, I think, too. And this is really, really valuable to spread around.
Thank you, Lena.
If I can just add to this, that this is exactly the reason why I would very much like if we had in Croatia and in the whole region of Southeast Europe more data, because I think, especially in the audiovisual sector, I have very nice colleagues. I don't often feel that I'm discriminated because I'm a woman, but I often see that there is sexism that they're not aware of, because they were raised to think a certain way or feel a certain way about the society they live in. And I think, and a lot of those men, and women as well, don't forget female sexism against other women and themselves. And when they see the data, which is why your work is exquisite, then they suddenly realize, oh my God, this is something's not working, because you don't have that daily in your mind unless you really actively think about it and see the numbers.
I mean, as I say, I was approached by certain men that they were offended because I didn't invite them to speak. And so I was like, but I mean, it's 10 years of media, and it's just a type of the event, and the focus came out on gender equality. I'm not making any, like women power or power by women or whatsoever, even though I put them in a hashtag or so. But I was really shocked because they are quite, intellectual, old and professional, but I've never experienced something like that throughout those 10 years. Yeah.
And have you ever run a panel that was only with men? And did anyone ever complain?
Yes. I was just approached as a counter, like a question, that my event was at the age, and that this woman told me, if you organized a panel only with men, then I would complain, which I don't think she would. She is in politics and stuff. So, but it's interesting to see what kind of reactions you receive by organizing something a bit maybe different, but important for the region and the country itself. Linda is waiting.
Yes. For many years, I was the only distributor in North America, not just Canada, who was female. And when I came to Cannes for the second or third time, I discovered other female distributors, New Zealand and Australia, remarkably. And so we started an organization called the Ladies' Night Out on Thursday at the end of Berlin and Cannes and the other major festivals where we bought films. And we became known as the Table of the Pink Mafia. So I always think I'm seeing the Pink Mafia. But Francine, Roberto Ola, who's a real promoter of gender equality, told me when I talked to him last that Canada has made remarkable progress in getting more women writers, directors, and producers. Do you have any statistics, and do you have any of their?
In fact, I will have the statistics from June onwards, because we're doing a big event in June in Montreal. We'll get that data all together and share it on the Eurimages website. But I mean, they really are making strides ahead, because whereas our focus has been in the European sector, especially on directors, male and female directors, they're going really across the board, not just looking at male and female directors. So from June, I'll have more data.
Okay, but not just data. What initiatives they think worked? What regulations they put into effect?
They had some, like a quota system, so making sure that it was equal distribution of public support and paying huge attention to, so that if it's a male or female director, male or female producer, male or female writer, paying attention across the board to it all. But I don't have all the details yet. But we will have them in the summer. So yeah.
Just to close up, yesterday during the dinner time, I was drinking our Croatian water, Jana, and there was a message. So I will read it to you. But it was an interesting message. For anything worth having, one must pay the price, and the price is always work, patience, love, and self-sacrifice. So, yes, it made me wonder, yeah. Anyways, we are running a bit out of time, but I would like to thank you for your contributions and sharing your thoughts and your plans and ideas. We definitely need the recommendation, and we need to also be more proactive when it comes to our national authorities. Because Austria already started with this gender incentive scheme, which means you will get an extra financing if there is a female director, female characters, just, step by step. But at least we need to start from somewhere, because the data is quite alarming, and we need to be aware of that. Thank you so much. Those ladies deserve the applause. Thank you.